This is Booking It to Financial Freedom, show number 18.
What discipline really is doing something enough to form a habit that now it becomes easier for you to accomplish.
Yep.
You know, if you're somebody who's trying to incorporate a new habit and after day 21 it's still a struggle for you, just keep going.
Just keep going. Don't give up. We don't have an unlimited amount of willpower all day long. Get up, do what it is that's most important, and then willpower and your time are yours.
Nobody knows their ultimate ceiling for achievement, so stop worrying about what will happen if you continue to push yourself.
Yeah.
You have no idea what your limits are, so don't self-impose those.
Welcome to Booking It to Financial Freedom, where we explore literature from some of the most successful experts in their field to help you build a blueprint for personal growth and financial freedom. Join us as we examine a new book every month and break down key concepts that help you get out of the rat race and on track to start building a life better than you ever imagined.
Hey everyone, I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, realtor and investor, and I'm here with my co-host, Jamie Booth. Hey Jamie.
Hey Amanda, how are you going?
Good, how are you?
Really sore. That's what I am.
We were talking about all the things you've been doing over the last week and a half, and I feel like you're abusing your body, but in a good way.
Well, I'm trying to make up for some lost time because the weather has been so nasty here. You know, obviously, anybody who's been watching the show, they know I set some pretty steep fitness goals for 1,500 miles this year and all that stuff. And January was just so cold. February is kind of nasty. So, you know, I was able to get miles in here and there. You know, for anyone who lives in Colorado knows what it's about. But, you know, we have, it could be January, it'd be 0 one day and it's 40, 50 the next day, is, and sunny.
Yep.
So trying to juggle those days and then make up for time. And this month so far, I've logged about 80 miles. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Knocked out the incline a couple times.
Yeah. You've done that twice now since we did it as a team.
Yeah.
And you're doing it tomorrow.
And yeah, I'm doing it again tomorrow.
I feel like now you're obsessed.
No, I just see the benefit of it,
Yeah.
Especially with my goal of doing a couple hundred miles on the Colorado Trail. Obviously, probably one of the hardest aspects of that is elevation.
Yeah.
So, just to be trained, ready to go, because my mindset is I want to be, walking 200 miles at once is hard enough as it is. So I want to go in physically fit, and so I'm not just completely miserable and suffering.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, there's going to be a certain aspect of that, but just to go in as strong as possible so I can get through it.
The incline will definitely whip you into shape quick.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like I said, the first time was an eye opener, and so far it hasn't really gotten any easier.
Yeah, but your time has gotten better every time, so I think.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah, from the first time to the second time was like a huge improvement. So it's just a matter of getting back into decent shape.
Yeah, we were. Sorry.
I was going to say, you have good news on.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
So, I think when we were talking about our goals, I had mentioned that Lindsay and I wanted to enter in like a tennis tournament and win. Well, we're still going to enter in something, but I just decided to join our local country club's tennis league. So I had my first tennis match last week, and I won against the other team's captain, no less.
Oh, wow.
So I played in high school a little bit. I think I played up until my junior year. So it's not like I have no experience in tennis, but I mean, that was 20 plus years ago, and I haven't played other than the last year or so.
That's something I have never, I tried to hit a couple tennis balls before, and they just went straight up in the air or right out of the court. And it's like,
yeah. Well, I'm blessed in the fact that I think I'm just kind of naturally athletic, but I've been working with a coach to really control that because especially as an athletic person, you want to hit the ball as hard as you can. And it's not about that. It's about technique and everything. So I have my second match tonight. It's a 6-week league. So we'll see how I do today.
Oh, nice. Well, good luck. I'm sure you're going to
do thanks.
Well, go undefeated.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. So, awesome. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get into the one thing. Last week was our first episode on this book, and we had ended with talking about some of the lies that Gary Keller talks about, the lies that basically were kind of, led to believe is truths in society. So we had talked about the lie that everything matters equally, and that's just not true. There are things, especially depending on our goals, that matter more in the time and in the moment.
The lie of work-life balance.
Yes.
Just balance in general in your life is a myth.
Not true. Yep. And we're going to expand on that a little bit more today, which I think is just a really interesting concept. And then the other one is multitasking, which I think we all kind of have come to learn that multitasking is impossible. At least multi-focus is impossible. You may be able to do two things at once, but you can't focus on
But you're not giving it full attention.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, so today we'll cover the last, I think it's 3 lies that he talks about. And the first one is having a disciplined life.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like this one.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, because we always hear the word disciplined, like, oh, I'm not getting such and such done because I need to be more disciplined. Or, you know, we tell our kids that they have to be more disciplined in doing their homework and doing that. Basically, Gary says that it's a myth that you can just automatically tap into some type of discipline and now you're a disciplined person. What discipline really is doing something enough to form a habit that now it becomes easier for you to accomplish every day, whatever it is. So as I started to think about this, I find that true in my own life. I was lucky in that I come from a pretty healthy family. You know, they knew the importance of exercise and eating well. And so I kind of grew up that way. And when I went to college, I was so afraid of gaining the freshman 15 that I started running and working out. So, I mean, that's been part of my life for 20 plus years. And I don't find it's not hard for me to wake up in the morning and go work out and eat healthy. Like, it's all things that naturally come to me, where I know other people struggle with that. It's not that I'm more disciplined. It's just that I've had years of experience doing it over and over.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway I got from this was, you know, like you said, discipline is an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
Having powerful habits, it creates, I don't know if you just said that, but creates the illusion of having a disciplined life, obviously. But what he's saying is, like, you have to basically just muster enough discipline to be able to develop the habit, and then the habit becomes easy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, it's neat there seeing we both have military background, and when I was in the Army, we always looked at discipline. I think the definition to us at the time was discipline is doing the right thing even when someone's not watching.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I guess it still kind of applies in this scenario. Is like, you know, who's keeping yourself accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like keeping yourself accountable to develop those powerful habits and then continuing to maintain them. So basically just muster all your energy into enough discipline to create that habit.
Right.
And the other thing he talks about is the powerful habits is, I think it's in this chapter. I don't think I'm jumping ahead of myself, but he also stresses the fact that you can only develop one powerful habit at a time. Mm-hmm. So completely trying to upend your life and completely re-engineering it all at once is not going to work. So you have to concentrate all of your discipline into developing one habit at a time.
Yeah, and I think he says once you do that, then working on the next habit and the next thing makes it that much easier. But you're exactly right. And I mean, I think we've even talked about this several times on the podcast. If you're trying to, improve your relationships, improve your emotional life, improve your physical life, all that stuff, you can't all of a sudden wake up and be like, okay, today I'm going to exercise for an hour. I'm going to spend an hour with my spouse. I'm going to spend an hour meditating. Like, you try to do all of those things all at once, and it just, you'll fail at all of them. Mm-hmm. So it's concentrating on, like Gary says, what is the one thing, the most important thing in my life that is lacking right now that I can work on, focus on that, develop the habit, and then it becomes the dominoes that he talks about, where all things start to fall in place.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later in this episode about, the question that you have to ask yourself. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to prioritizing what habit you want to develop, you have to kind of step back and look and see, like you said, what is the most important thing I need to change in my life right now, whether it's your health or, stopping drinking or whatever whatever that may be. You have to decide what the most important thing is, develop that habit, and then move on to the next one.
Yep. He says that, that if you aim discipline at the right habit, it gives you the license to be a bit less disciplined in other areas. When you're doing the right thing, it liberates you from having to monitor everything. Yep. So it's a great way to look at it. My favorite example that he uses is Michael Phelps, because they say that when he was younger, his teachers would tell his parents, like, he's so undisciplined, he can't focus, he can't do this. And then this man goes on to win 18 gold medals, and his parents say he is the most disciplined person they know. And while he was training for the Olympics, he swam every single day, 365 days a year, never took a single break, was very disciplined, but he was focused. That was the difference. Like, he may have been, and I think we've all read about things that he's done in the media, you know, he may have been a bit of a partier, etc. So you wouldn't necessarily say all aspects of his life were disciplined, but the most important thing to him was uber disciplined.
Which is I guess ironic, because he was, you know, as he was a horrible student growing up. He had ADHD, and basically all of his teachers told his parents he would never basically amount to anything. And then look what he went on to accomplish. But it's kind of funny, because this is echoed throughout the book as far as focusing on the one thing, obviously the name of the book and all that stuff. But, you know, the concentrating on the one thing and being absolutely amazing at it. You know, you wouldn't think that you could take something like swimming. I mean, look at the success that he, not only just in the Olympics, but by concentrating on just the swimming, everything else in his life kind of fell into place. You know, like he grew his wealth, he grew his success, his fame, all that stuff, just because he was concentrating on the one thing that was most important in his life.
I think it helps a person prove to themselves that they can do it too. Once you've made something else a habit and it becomes, you know, regular in your life, you're like, oh, well, I made this happen. Why can't I also do
You have
this?
to constantly push yourself and do hard things. So I really like that idea, because once you've done something, it's kind of like, you know, since we were talking about running, you know, same thing. When I joined the Army, we had to go, like, early on in training, we had to do like a 4-mile road march. And at the time, I thought 4 miles was like, it might as well have been 1,000,000 miles. Like, how could people walk 4 miles? You know? And I was, you know, I played high school football and stuff, so I was I thought I was fit. I wasn't, not to Army standards, but, you know, and then once you do that first 4-miler, you're like, oh, I guess, you know, I can do that. And then, you know, when you're, or like another example for running is when you start doing long distance running, at first, when you're like out of shape, 6-8 miles, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so far. But once you work your way up to where you're doing like a 15-18 mile run, you know, then you look back and the 8-mile run is like basically just a warm up, you know? Exactly.
That's so true. Another thing he brings up in this section is that we're told that it takes 21 days to form a habit. And he said that's really not backed by science. There were actual researchers at the University College of London that discovered that on average, it actually takes 66 days.
On average.
They said it can be anywhere from 18 to 254 days, which is a huge range, obviously. But they found that around day 66 was really the sweet spot that it started to become a true habit for people. And obviously you have to take into account how difficult the habit is to implement. If it's something very easy, like brushing your teeth, you know, it probably only takes a few days or weeks to get in the habit of doing that and not having to think about it. If it's something much more difficult, it's going to take more days. But I just wanted to point that out because, you know, if you're somebody who's trying to incorporate a new habit and after day 21, it's still a struggle for you, just keep going.
Just keep going. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, he says that after you've developed those habits, right, it becomes easier and less time consuming, generally speaking. Right? You're not putting, it's, you know, after it becomes easy, it's less effort.
No, you're right. I even think about that with the Miracle Morning, the book we just read. When I first started it, the first week, it was like, I don't know, it felt like it took me a while in the morning to like get going and whatever. And then it's like, what am I going to journal about? What am I going to do? But once I started to do it for a couple weeks in a row, it was like, oh, I can get all of this done.
It just starts happening automatically almost.
Right?
Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. It wasn't coming out.
I got you. Okay. And then the line number 4 is that willpower is always on will call. And they talk about the marshmallow test, which is one of my favorite.
That's actually a really cool study.
And I've heard this in various other things that I've read, but and I'm going to try to summarize it and correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, they took a bunch of kids, they put them in a room and they said, you know, we need you to wait here for like 15, 20 more minutes. If you can wait, so we will give you 1 treat now. Or if you can wait 20 more minutes, we'll give you 2 treats. Basically, they were just testing to see their willpower. You know, would they be able to wait those full 20 minutes for?
Well, they give them the treat and then leave them alone in the room.
Oh yeah, sorry, the treat is in the room with them.
So they had like it's right in front of their face.
Yep.
And then they walk out and then the kids are like squirming in their seats. They're like
licking it.
Yeah, they're like sniffing it, licking it, doing like, you know, all kinds of methods to try to distract themselves to maintain willpower.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So, and then, so they did this study, and I guess what they were saying that the guy who was doing it had his own kids in it as well. And he started to notice patterns developing when they were in elementary school, which led to the rest of the study that they did later on in life when all of those kids who participated in the study got older, like college level and stuff like that.
Yeah, because they were saying, so basically, on average, the kids held out 3 minutes before they ended up eating the treat in front of them. And only 3 of the 10 kids managed to actually delay gratification for the whole 20 minutes and get the 2 treats. So he put these kids into different categories. The people who were able to wait, he called them high delayers. And like you said, was able to study them basically throughout high school and beyond, and discovered that the high delayers had higher general academic achievements, SAT scores, higher feelings of self-worth, and better stress management. And the lower delayers were 30% more likely to be overweight, suffered higher rates of drug addiction, etc. So I think the whole point was that there are some of us that are actually probably born with more willpower than others. So it's just recognizing that some people are able to tap into that a little easier than others. I think is the whole point.
Yeah, this chapter is a lot about managing your willpower, right? Basically the point is saying we don't have an unlimited amount of willpower all day long, So kind of the point that he's making is like you should accomplish your most important tasks when your willpower is at its highest, and being able to manage your willpower throughout the day. And I've read this book before a couple times, and I'm aware of this stuff, but it just still slips your mind after time. And I was reading it again in preparation for the episode, and I'm like, oh, this is me, because you go out and do 6-mile runs, and you work, and you're crunching, and then by the end of the day, there'll be days I'm like, I'm not gonna have I like beer. I'd be like, I'm not gonna drink any beer today. But by the end of the day, like my willpower is shot, and I'm like, screw it, I'm having a beer. So that's a perfect example of running out of willpower. And you have to manage. You have to be conscious of it, and you have to manage it. And then he goes into talking about other things of how to, which I think we're going to talk about. Yeah. You talk about the food. Yeah. The saying, food for thought. I mean, that's relevant because I guess the type of foods that you're eating can obviously help maintain focus and discipline as well. So I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, he's saying willpower has limited battery life. So he ties this in with saying, identify the one thing that you need to do for the day that is the most important thing, and you do that early in the day to make sure that gets done and your willpower is there for that most important task. And then, you can do the other things, throughout the day that aren't as important, but your focus and all your energy is available for that one thing.
Again, like a fitness analogy here, I noticed, throughout my entire military career, if I didn't go to the gym first thing in the morning, then I was far, far more likely to not go to the gym that day, because I'd be like, oh, I slept in, didn't go to the gym. I'm like, oh, I'll do it after work. And then there's like a million excuses that you can find throughout the day to end up not going to the gym. So, that's a perfect example. Get up, do what it is that's most important, and then how your willpower and your time are yours.
And just to make a distinction too, when he says willpower, he's not talking about just doing things that are tough for us to do. He's talking about having to make important decisions throughout the day. So he says, it's interesting because the brain makes up 1/50th of our body, but it consumes 1/5 of the calories that we consume, or it uses 1/5.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if, for example, you're not, having to do a really hard workout that day or doing things physically demanding, if you're doing a lot of mentally demanding things, it is the same thing, and your willpower is going to be zapped. If you're a high-level CEO and you have to make lots of important decisions, like by the end of the day, you're going to want that beer and chocolate bar because you are just tapped out. So making sure that those decisions are made early. And he gives the example of, they did a study on members of a parole board. This was so interesting. And they said they basically sit from like 8 to 4 p.m. every day and have to hear, dozens of cases on parole. And they give them 2 breaks throughout the day, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. And 65% of the parolees, or people that were up for parole, had a chance of being released if their case came up right after either one of those breaks or first thing in the morning. If it was towards the end where they were about to go to break or very end of the day, they had almost a 0% chance of being given parole, because when we are in that state of stress where we can no longer make a decision, we default to what we already know or feel comfortable with, which for the
judges it was saying
stay in jail
because like huge consequences to the decision, so they were just like, no.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be like, make sure you schedule me early.
Yeah.
There was another example used in the book that I thought was very interesting too, because willpower, and it shows that it was a study that was done, and it shows just how finicky our willpower is. It was the one where they asked people to memorize numbers.
Yes.
So they had them either memorize just a 2 number combination or a 7 number combination. They put them in a room, said, you have as much time as you want, and the average person memorizing a 7 number combination shouldn't be that difficult. But and then after they took their time, memorized the numbers, they had to walk to another room. I think I'm getting the story right. And between the rooms, they were offered either a salad or a piece of cake. And the people who had memorized the 7-digit number were like, I think 2 times as likely to take the cake as a choice, as opposed to the people who did the 2 numbers. So just the little mental effort of memorizing a 2 versus a 7-digit number was enough to sap those people willpower very noticeably.
Yeah, and he has a little chart in the book that talks about things that zap our willpower, and I just wanted to go over a couple of them because I don't think everyone would probably think that this is something that really zaps your willpower. But one of the most interesting is filtering distractions, which goes along with what we were talking about last week, how you can't multitask. And if you are concentrating on a task and get interrupted and then you have to switch back to that other task, that alone is zapping your willpower, where instead if you just focused, finished a task, then went on to the next one, you're more likely to be able to conserve your willpower. But even just a lot of emotional things like restraining aggression, suppressing impulses, coping with fear, trying to impress others, all of those things can also zap your willpower. So all just things to consider.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff, we relate with stress or whatever, even use it's like implementing a new behavior. So it's trying to start a new habit is enough to zap your willpower. So, all these things, I think the key is just being conscious of it, which is, it's really, I mean, I guess if you wouldn't read a book like this, I don't think anybody would just sit there on their normal day and be like, oh, I'm sapping my willpower. Like, this is why I'm making these bad decisions, right?
Especially because we live a lot of our life in snippets of information on social media. And, if you're anyone that follows like some fitness influencers, etc., I mean, so many quotes about just like, get up and do it and willpower and blah, blah, blah. And so you read that and it makes you think like, crap, what is wrong with me that I don't have the willpower to go to the gym every day and all that? Because all you're seeing is that one little snippet. You're not taking all of this into consideration and understanding that if you're trying to get your workout in at the end of your day, it's not going to happen.
Most likely not.
Yeah. So, okay. And then I think, is this the last lie? No, it's the second to last. A balanced life. Basically, we always hear people say, I need more balance or work-life balance, that kind of stuff. And this is impossible, Gary says. It's interesting the way it kind of transpired through history because, back in the day when we were hunters gatherers, that's all we did. Like our job was basically for survival. So, that's what we did. But then as Industrial Revolution, we started having more technology and now we started working for people. And now people had a say on what our schedule was. And so they're now dictating, we work certain hours, we work a certain amount, that kind of stuff. Now we started to need a work-life balance because we were balancing working and earning a paycheck with spending time with family.
Right. I found this really interesting. Like, I'm a bit of a history buff, and I never really thought of that. Like, before the industrialization of, everything, everyone worked for themselves for the most part.
Yeah.
Very few people worked for somebody else. Like, you were either a carpenter or a blacksmith, or you were a farmer, or, whatever. And everyone had skills before that. Like, you had to have a skill to survive. If you didn't do whatever it was you did, you died.
Yeah, they didn't think about it as working for a paycheck.
Yeah, it was just your life.
Yeah.
So it was, I thought that was really interesting.
I thought
kind
so
of
too.
a way to think about, well, not way to think about it, was reality.
Right.
But people don't really think about how life was before, the 9 to 5 grind that we all accept as reality today.
Right. And then he was just saying, in the 20th century and now the 21st century, like there's a huge emphasis. I think it started in like the 90s of like work-life balance and, even reducing the number of hours we work.
What was it?
Blah, blah, blah.
The term didn't exist until like in the 1980s. I think it was the first time that it was started to kind of show up in magazines, newspapers, articles, all that good stuff.
Right. And he said, it makes sense, this desire, because it's just a desire for balance. But, we want enough time for everything and everything done in time, but that's not possible. And part of that problem is that if you want to become an extraordinary person, you have big, lofty goals.
You have to live in the extremes.
Exactly. You can't just live in the middle and hope that you'll achieve those big goals.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
I like the fact that he used it was like a line or something, if you have a line, if you're balanced, you're in the middle. And if you're in the middle, you're really not showing, if you're in the middle of everything, you're not good at anything.
Exactly.
Or you're not excelling at any different aspect of your life. So you have to live for massive success, you have to live a large portion of your time to that one extreme, but you don't have to stay there.
Exactly. Yeah. And he kind of plays devil's advocate too, because he's like, well, you don't want to push yourself to that one extreme and, become somebody who doesn't spend any time with your family or goes and, lives off the land and blah, 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 like to the extreme. The answer is counterbalance, which I love this concept and never heard it put like this. But basically, that there's chunks of time in your life where you are going to have to concentrate heavily on one item. You get that item accomplished and then you come back to the middle. So for instance, if you've got a big work project, you're opening a business, maybe for a few months, that business is really your main focus. He's not saying sacrifice your time with your family and your personal life, but maybe you can't dedicate as much time to those things because you're dedicating it to your business. It takes you 6 months to get that business launched off the ground. Now it's going, it's running. You've set the systems in place to let it kind of do its own thing. Now you come back to the middle. Maybe you take a vacation with your family to make up for some of that time. And your family is now your focus. And for 2 weeks while you're on vacation, that's your extreme. And then you come back to the middle and you just continue to counterbalance back and forth.
Yeah, there's a couple different examples he used in the book that I like. Is he uses he's talking about the businessman who worked like, basically completely with talking about the balance thing. He was completely focused on his work. He's like, I'll work. I'll save up all this money, all this stuff. And then after I've accomplished all this stuff with my business life, then I'll be able to retire and then I'll be able to spend time with my family. But reality is, his kids are grown up, all of the stuff that he lost because he was completely focused on it. So he didn't counterbalance anything. He was completely focused on his career all the way up to the time he was retired. And then he's lost it, most everything. And then the other one that I really like was the juggling one, the juggling analogy and this is really important. And we were kind of having this conversation before about, obviously the balance is an illusion, but you can't neglect other aspects of your life. So I like the analogy with the juggling. So your work life is a rubber ball. Your family, your fitness, and I think there was something else. Those balls are made of glass, right? So if you drop your work ball, it'll bounce back. It's resilient. But if you drop all of your family, or if you completely drop your fitness, obviously those things will shatter.
Yes.
And you might not ever be able to get them back.
Yes.
So I thought that was pretty cool there.
That's a perfect analogy. And this kind of brings me back to why we started this podcast, because we want to show people that there's more to life than just working until you're 65. So we want to show people that you can have that balance, that if you live in the extremes to maybe build your own business, to invest in real estate, to build your wealth, that can actually help you with that counterbalance and give you more time rather than just working until you're 65, taking, minimal vacations because that's what your company gives you. And then by the time you're 65, now you you or your spouse or your family, they're moved out of the house, one has cancer, like something happens, you know. So getting people out of the mindset of having to wholly focus on one thing and neglect others, introducing that counterbalance.
Yeah, it's, this stuff's so powerful as far, this means a lot to me to be able to do this podcast and to share this information with people, because it completely changes your mindset the more you read stuff like this. And, I just heard on the radio this morning that Jerry Springer died.
Oh.
He got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and 2 weeks later he's dead. So things like that. And then my brother-in-law died earlier this year from pancreatic cancer. He was afforded more time, than 2 weeks, but we don't ever know when these things are going to affect us. So it's about just having your best life. You don't have to be a slave to the system. Like you said, 9 to 5, work until you're 65. And now, like, some countries are trying to raise retirement age to like 75. So like basically work until you die. I mean, it's a sad reality for most people. And we want people to be able to break free from that.
Absolutely. Okay, that brings us to the last lie, which is that big is bad. And Gary says this is basically the worst lie of all, because if you fear big success, then you'll either avoid it or sabotage your own efforts to achieve it.
This is really powerful because I think everyone is guilty of it. Even some of the more successful people. I know you and I are most likely guilty. I know for a fact I am. But it's just the limiting belief that you don't deserve to, big things, right? I see this repeated in a lot of these type of books where, it's in the Bible even, ask and ye shall receive, right? There was a quote I wanted to write down, I forgot to, but it's basically like, whatever you ask for in life, it will give you. But you have to ask the question, right? So when you don't dream big, you're never going to make it big. You have to believe that you can achieve big things, right? So we always relate big, like he uses the big bad wolf analogy, or big bad John, or something, something like that. Like we tend to relate big with negativity for some reason.
I think part of it too is the fear. So people do have those limiting beliefs that they're not worth it, but then it's also the fear. And this kind of goes back to what he was teaching with multitasking, that people who overly multitask overestimate how long something is going to take. And I see this with the same thing as going big, because we think, oh, if I want to grow my business, or I want, this much in sales every month, or this much wealth, well, that's going to be hard, complicated, and time consuming. So I'm already convinced myself that it's too hard, and I'm afraid, and I'm never going to.
You're never going to move forward.
And we'll talk about it a little bit, I think, here coming up, but just how in Gary's own life, he found that actually once he stopped being so kind of in the rat race and actually calmed down a little bit, his success grew. And I feel like that's a constant theme that we're kind of I'm trying to convince myself of it, but it's a constant theme throughout these books. The other thing is that nobody knows their ultimate ceiling for achievement. So stop worrying about what will happen if you continue to push yourself. You have no idea what your limits are, so don't self-impose those before you even know.
Yeah, like the question he asked, like if I were to ask you, what is the limit of your success? Would you set yourself at a really low bar?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to make $1 million a year or $10 million a year, or where would you set your bar?
Right.
Like I just want to make $35,000.
Right. Exactly.
Right. No one's gonna answer that. They're gonna say as big as they as they think is possible.
Achievable.
So,
yeah, exactly. And he just gave a couple examples about basically this section made me think of visualization from Miracle Morning. Miracle Morning is teaching you to help to visualize and seeing yourself in the position you're not in yet, so that you can convince yourself that you can be there. And he used the examples of Sam Walton from Walmart, and that before he had even opened up his first business, he already had visions of like $1 billion industry. Same with J.K. Rowling. Before she even wrote her first book, she had already in her head planned 7 years at Hogwarts or something, I think is if there's 7 books. So having that growth versus a fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is the limiting beliefs and just I am going to stay where I'm comfortable. That growth mindset is I'm going to continue to get better and better and better.
And there was another example, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the guy who went into Silicon Valley and created Hotmail.
Like I think he was an immigrant.
He was an immigrant, came into the country, said, I am going to build a multi-million-dollar product, and then he did exactly what he said he was going to do. So you tell yourself you're going to do something, you tend to lean towards those goals.
Yeah, and back in the day, everyone had Hotmail.
Yeah. I think they said at one point there was like close to 400 million users.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so then Gary transitions into what he calls the truths, and there are basically three main truths that he focuses on. Before we get into each of those, he kind of gives a little history of how he came to discover these truths and also the lies that we talked about. And so basically, to summarize, he said that when he first started, he kind of believed all the hype of like, you have to dress exactly how you need to dress to be successful. So in his case, he loves wearing t-shirt and jeans.
Fake it till you make it.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. Like he was buying into all of that, and he did all of that. He would wake up early in the morning. He'd be the first one in the office. He said to the point that he would be the first one in the office and then take a nap.
Yeah, he would drive in like an hour early.
Just to show he's the first one.
Just so he knew he was the first. And then he was talking about the way he dressed, the way he acted, like completely.
It wasn't him.
It wasn't him. It was completely living a false life to project success.
Yes.
Because that was what he was trying to achieve. He was trying to project success in every aspect of his life and his workspace. So it was detrimental to his health.
Yeah, it basically led to burnout.
Yeah.
And so something I wanted to point out is, yes, we have read The Miracle Morning and how it's important to start your day in a certain routine. But I think his point here is that he was taking it to the extreme. So yes, live your life as though
I did notice that was kind of contradictory.
It's a little bit contradictory, but
Miracle Morning.
I think it's, in my opinion, I think he's talking about the extreme.
Yeah, he was taking it to the extreme.
There's one thing of visualizing yourself at a different level than you are now, but when you are living every moment of your day in chaos and just trying to do as much as possible, you're going to reach burnout. And he doesn't mention what his health issue was, but he had some major health issue that happened.
He was talking about how like his body was tense all the time. Like he, was just always high strung, super tense. And then once he was able to break free from the, mirage that he was trying to create, everything was better for him. Like every aspect of his life turned around. Yeah,
he said he started to spend time with family, he got in shape, and he literally started to do less, and he actually became more successful. And that is such a common theme through everything we read is it's not about filling every hour of your day. It's about doing it smartly and doing the most important things that you can do to get to your success, but it's not about just being busy all day. Yeah. So that's the hugest distinction.
Yeah, I think that goes back into the multitasking. It's like everyone wants to appear like they're busy, but they're really not. We talked about this before about living your life off lists and all this other stuff. Yeah, you may have accomplished like 15, 20 things that was on your to-do list, but does those things really affect the outcome of where you're trying to go? Like, are they that important?
Yeah, and they're not. And he's saying it's virtually impossible to have that many things that matter that much to achieving your goals. So you need to find those one things. This is a little blurb that I got, and I just want to read it because I think it's just perfect. He said, we overthink, overplan, and overanalyze our careers, our businesses, our lives, that long hours are neither virtuous nor healthy, and that we usually succeed in spite of most of what we do, not because of it. I discovered that we can't manage time, and that the key to success isn't in all the things we do, but in the handful of things that we do well. Yeah, so... And that is something I definitely struggle with because there are days that I've had a very full day and I look back and I'm like, what did I accomplish today? But since reading this, I am trying so much harder to really identify what is the most important thing, that even if I don't get everything else done that day, if I do this one thing, I will feel like I accomplished something.
You have to focus on the most powerful thing. Kind of going back to the last section about fearing big, I like that. What he says is like, don't fear big, fear mediocrity, fear waste, fear lack of living life to your fullest, right? So by doing all of those all of those menial things that really don't impact the outcome of what it is you're trying to accomplish, you're not you're not doing what you're
Exactly. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up with the two of the truths that he talked about, and the most important one, and the one that was basically the title of this book, is the focusing question. And he just basically says he came up with this because answers come from questions, and the quality of the answers that we get directly determine the quality of the question. So constantly asking ourselves throughout the day, what is the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Mm-hmm. So that is the question that he says he asks himself throughout the day, when he wakes up in the morning, when he gets to work, and when he comes home for his family.
And for people who are listening to this and kind of thinking that the one thing has to be the same thing every day, mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing every day.
Yep.
What is the most important thing for you to accomplish in your life that day?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can change every day.
Yes.
For certain fields like us, obviously relating it to the real estate or, being a realtor, lead generation.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could get that out. But, yeah. Relating to that, like every single day I should be doing lead generation. That should be the most important thing to building my business. Right?
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing for everybody.
Yeah, and I would argue that, yes, lead generating is important because our future selves thank us for that. But if you've got a ton of clients to work with that day and you're trying to get one specific client under contract and it takes a lot of effort, your one thing for that day is probably getting that client under contract, mm-hmm. So yes, I totally agree. I think it varies every day. And one thing I liked about this chapter is that I think he really helps clarify that it's not one thing. Like there's not just one thing throughout the day. It's the one thing in my business. It's the one thing in my spirituality. It's the one thing in my overall health, the one thing with my family. Asking yourself those questions in those 4 or 5 important pillars in your life. Mm-hmm. So it's not just my one thing is, lead generating for the day and that's it. And I neglect my family. It's asking it for every single aspect.
And that's kind of almost contradictory to what we were talking about with the illusion of balance. Because mm-hmm. obviously that's kind of creating it, but you still, bottom line is you can't neglect those other aspects of your life.
Yes, exactly.
You can come back and manage them as needed. And the other thing that I don't think we said when we were talking about the balance thing is when you're trying to work on, say, the family side of the balance, you focus on it 100%. Mm-hmm. He talks about that in the book, that no matter what it is, that one thing is at that particular time, you focus 100% on what that is.
Yes.
Right. So if it's work, if it's family, if it's your fitness, you focus on each one 100% at each time, and then they all work out.
Yeah. But it's giving that focus 100% when it's time. And he said you can combine a lot of the stuff together. Maybe you want to spend more time with your spouse, so you and your spouse join a gym together and you work out together, mm-hmm. or you go to church together, or whatever it is. So you're combining your spirituality and your relationships, however that works. But a lot of times you can combine the things and be able to focus on both of them together. So, and his truth number 2 is the success habit, which we kind of already talked about, but it's basically making that focusing question become a habit. So again, asking it throughout the day and asking yourself, what's the one thing I can do to ensure that I exercise or find time for myself or improve my relationship with my spouse, making that a habit that you do over and over. And it may seem overwhelming to try to do that in all aspects in your life or ask that question in the minute details. So he said, start with the big picture. What is the one thing in your life right now? If you're struggling financially, maybe asking yourself, what's the one thing I can do to get out of this financial stress, which will then help improve my relationships with my, family, which will then blah, 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 blah. Like it's all compounding. So trying to find that big question, one thing first, and then you can continue to narrow it down.
Yeah. So. Basically the same way you were looking at, whatever habit you want to create. What is the most important thing that, aspect of my life that I have to create this mm-hmm. powerful habit that will make everything else easy,
yes.
right?
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of work. I truly do. His concepts are understandable, but actually putting them into practice, it's going to take time. And it's the habit and just seeing how it works for you.
Yeah. It's amazing how such a simple concept can be, can almost be overwhelming. But if you follow the advice, mm-hmm. and you focus on the one thing at a time, everything will start to fall into place. And, don't get caught up in the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. I think that about wraps it up for today. I would just encourage our listeners to start taking action now, putting into into your life the principles that we've talked about with the one thing, maybe identifying the one big picture question you can ask yourself or in your area of life of what's the one thing I can improve upon that will help everything else. Start just thinking about what that is, talk with your spouse, whatever, and try to figure out what that one thing is. And then next week, we're going to finish the last couple truths that he talks about and explore the rest of the book. And then our 4th episode for this one will be an interview with a special guest.
And before we wrap up, for anybody who's been following us, you know that we covered Miracle Morning. I love the fact that you can tie the one thing in the Miracle Morning into each other, right? So you wake up, you have your Miracle Morning, and then you go directly into your one thing. Yep. I think it's so powerful how you can tie the two together. And I think that if you're able to do your Miracle Morning and then accomplish your one thing, like everything else is just gravy after that.
Yeah, and maybe if people have struggle with the journaling part of Miracle Morning like you and I do, maybe that's what you journal about is what's the one thing for today.
Well, you know what? I realized actually today, I was thinking about it while I was on my run, like my journaling is going to be basically tracking my fitness goals.
Great.
So like just being able, because I personal trainer back in the day and all that stuff. So tracking volume of my workouts and miles and blah, blah, blah. But at least that's something like I've captured at least one aspect of my day that I can put down on paper and be able to reference later on.
Yeah. Great. Cool. You want to take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think you got any value out of today's episode and maybe you think someone else could value from this, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Join us next week as we continue to review the one thing and basically wrap it up for the most part. Also, if you want to find out more about the A-Team, you can check us out at theateam.homes on both Facebook and Instagram.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
See you next
Thanks,
time.
everybody. We'll see you next week.